Kwame Alexander is an American writer of both poetry and children's fiction. His verse novel, The Crossover, won the 2015 Newbery Medal, recognising the year's most distinguished contribution to American literature for children. His latest title, Rebound, has been shortlisted for both the Carnegie Medal and Clipper Award, and will also appear on the Year 6 book list for the 2019-20 Reading Gladiators programme. Kwame met recently with Nikki to talk about Rebound and his other work.
I wonder, Kwame, whether we could actually start with a reading from the book.
Absolutely.
And the first bit, the chapter or the section called Looking Back, could be a really good start.
It was the summer when Now and Laters cost a nickel and the Fantastic Four $1. When I met Harriet Tubman and the Harlem Globetrotters. It was the hottest summer after the coldest winter ever, when a storm shattered my home into a million little pieces, and soaring above the sorrow and grief seemed impossible. It was the summer of 1988, when basketball gave me wings, and I had to learn how to rebound on and off the court.
Welcome to your life. There's no turning back. Even while we dream, we will find you acting on your best behavior. Turn your back on Mother Nature. Everybody wants to rule the world. Everybody wants to rule the world.
So yeah, Nikki, this is a book about a boy who's just trying to find his place in the world.
And a boy who's had a trauma in his life, and the book deals with how he learns to cope with that trauma. One of the things that really affected me in a good way was the relationships within the story. And it seemed to me that everybody was trying to cope with their problems on their own and actually had to learn to come together through this story.
We are sort of better equipped to deal and heal with those very real things that are happening in our lives when we have a support system, when we have friends, when we have family, when we allow those people who care about us to help us.
And it's quite interesting, isn't it, that Charlie's obviously suffering, but is quite unaware, really. You read between the lines, and as an adult, certainly you know that his mother must be suffering too, but he doesn't really see that at the beginning, does he?
When do we all really see it? Like, even as adults, we're dealing with stuff in our lives that a lot of times we don't even know the extent to which we're dealing with it, but it impacts us. It impacts us physically, emotionally, spiritually. We don't really know the extent of it. But I think having people around you, they can point it out. They can call you on it, like Charlie's mother does. Like, look, you can't act like that. I raised you better than this. And it makes you stop and sort of take notice. I can't stress the importance, how much I tell my daughter all the time, it's important that you really look at the people who are around you, because they're going to play a big role in whether you succeed or fail in this life. I try to surround myself with people who are smart, who are caring, who are loving, who are giving, because it reminds me that I got to be all those things, you know?
Absolutely. So one of the things that happens to Charlie in this novel, when he becomes Chuck, is that his mother can't cope, or I wouldn't say she can't cope, but she feels that she will cope better on her own.
Right,
That's what she feels.
Right.
And she sends him away to stay with his grandparents for the summer, where he encounters quite a lot of wisdom, not only from his grandparents, but from his cousin, Roxy, too. What a great character she is. Yeah. I loved her.
I loved writing her. I loved being able to write a strong, empowered, funny, confident girl, you know, because that's what I've been around with my sisters and my daughters and my wife and my mother. And so I wanted to write that girl. I felt like that was important, you know. And Chuck, at the beginning of the novel, does not know how to play basketball. And in Crossover, which is the next book, his sons are basketball players, and you learn that they know how to play because of him. So how is it that he learned how to play? And how cool is it that he learned from his cousin Roxy, that she taught him how to play and gave him the confidence to think that it's not just about making the last shot, but you got to have the confidence to take it, or you're never going to make it.
Yeah. And I think that's emphasised again by his granddad at the end. Says you've got to get the ball and you've got to keep shooting. You've just got to keep shooting.
My grandparents were especially both of them, my grandmother, my grandfather, they were just huge influences on me. I remember one day I went to pick up my grandfather from work, and he was about 77, and I had my girlfriend with me. I was maybe 17, and we went inside, my girlfriend and I, to get him, and he walked out with sort of he was very old, and he was walking with a limp, and he got to the car, and I went around to the driver's seat to get in the car, and he was like, "Hey, get back over here right now." And I walked back. I was like, "Yes, sir." And he said, "You always open the door for a young lady." So he made me open the door for her. I remember that to this day, and that happened 30 years ago, 35 years ago. So I find that I learned a lot from my grandparents, and I really wanted to write that story so that Chuck could learn a lot about life on and off the court from his family, in particular his grandparents and Roxy.
Yeah. And his granddad's not an easy man to like necessarily at the beginning. The relationship grows and it develops, but there's a line in there that, if there's one line that I were to pick out that struck me, it's about owning the sadness. Don't let the sadness own you. What does that mean to you?
None of us are ever prepared for death. How do you lose someone? What's the protocol for that? I don't have the answer, but having experienced it with my own mother passing away, I know that some of the ability to keep moving forward has to come from the memories. It has to come from those moments that you can look back on and say, those are pretty precious, And I think in that regard, you don't let the sadness just overwhelm you constantly. You have those things that you can pinpoint and say, I remember her turkey. I remember her turkey and noodles that she made for me on Sundays. I remember the birthday cake that we shared when I was 3 years old in a Howard Johnson's hotel. I remember all of the precious memories.
I wondered whether, because jazz is a theme through this too, I wondered whether jazz is a way of owning the sadness, because you have to have kind of control over music when you're playing, and yet you express, through music you can express quite deep emotion, very deep emotion.
Well, let's find out.
Precious memories fade like grass, they say. All my memories of you are fresh as yesterday. Give the best years of my life for 1 hour of your time. But that gets tricky, I get greedy, and never want to leave your side. I need you like a tree needs sun to grow. I need you like a heart needs blood to flow. And you promised you would care for me. And in all the times I cannot see, I feel your presence here with me always. Here with me always, Mama.
It's a metaphor, my grandfather says, as we drive by several big white buildings on either side of us. Jazz music is like an automobile. That's a simile I correct, which makes my cousin Roxy laugh. Pay attention now, he continues. If jazz were a car, Miles Davis would be a convertible black Mustang GT. Coltrane would be the Corvette. And Thelonious Monk, well, that cat would probably be a vintage Fiat. Jazz is smooth and slick, and it takes you places. Anywhere you want to go. Anywhere you want to go.
Are you clearly a jazz fan?
I love jazz. I love music, but jazz is... I write to jazz.
Right. Tell me about Horace Silver.
Oh, Filthy McNasty, a mythical man-child of rather dubious distinction. I discovered Horace Silver in a Panera Bread. Do you all have Panera Bread here?
No.
It's a coffee house in the United States that serves, it's a chain that serves sandwiches and bagels and breakfast and lunch food. So I would go there to write every day, and I would listen to Pandora, to instrumental jazz music. And one day I was listening and heard this song, and it just rocked my world. And I said, I've got to figure out a way to include this song in the book. And of course, the name of it, as I discovered, was Filthy McNasty. And I decided that would be the main character's nickname. And then I gave it a whole backstory that found its way into the prequel, Rebound. I had to sort of give its origin story, how that song came into their family. And it was a record that that Chuck's grandfather had, and he played it to remind him of his son.
So you say you write to jazz, and when you hear the words off the page, you wouldn't some of them, you wouldn't necessarily know that you're reading a verse novel until you look at it on the page. The look of it's really important.
Right.
But then, as you were talking about jazz being there in the background, the way it looks on the page really emphasises that syncopated rhythm. Is that something that you're consciously doing?
Absolutely. I mean, I can't claim credit for that because I borrowed that from the dean or the bard of Harlem, of Harlem literature, Langston Hughes, who wrote in that jazz sort of syncopation, who used that rhythm. And then you think of poets from the 1960s like Ted Jones and Nikki Giovanni and Sonia Sanchez, and they used that same sort of, jazz motif throughout their work, and they were inspired by those rhythms. So I think music plays a big role in my work.
There are different kinds of writing through this novel. There's the speech, and then we have you mimicking the game of basketball itself. I loved some of those passages where you really felt that you were following the ball in your writing. Tell me a little bit about the process that you go through to write those things.
Kick so hot his feet glow, move so cold you see snow, tall as a cypress tree, bro, game so lit make seeds grow, in your face 3D show, game so deep it's below, air so swift you breathe slow, watch me fly from the free throw, Superman is sweet, yo, but Nikki is my hero. Hey!
Do you bounce the ball while you're writing?
It starts with sort of the thinking of the ball on the court and the rhythm of it. It started with the rhythm. And once I get the rhythm, then it's like, okay, well, what do I want to talk about? Well, I want to talk about sneakers first. I want to talk about he's at the court and he's watching the game and he wishes he could play and he wishes he could be like them, and his kick's so hot and his kicks, ooh, look at his sneakers. Those kicks so hot. What happens to his feet? Well, if it's hot, then it's sunlight. It's shining. It's glistening. His feet are glowing. His feet are glowing. His kick so hot. His feet glow. Moves, and then we're gonna go sort of the opposite direction. If his kick so hot, now we're gonna sort of show the dichotomy of it. Well, his moves. What's like a word I could use to show his moves are really on it? He's got moves. Well, cold, like in African American vernacular and slang from the 70s. If you say something's cold, that's cold, yo. That's cold. That's cold-blooded. Cold means that's hot. That's good. That's nice. So moves so cold, kicks so hot, his feet glow. moves so cold. Well, now what's going to work with the metaphor of cold? Well, freezing, ice. Yeah, but now we need to make it rhyme, with glow. Okay, well, snow. Moves so, kicks so hot his feet glow. Moves so cold you see snow. So now it's just like I'm in the rhythm. Now it's just like using my vocabulary dictionary, thesaurus, just figuring out what words are going to work. Poetry is about using the right words in the right order.
Yeah. So listening to you almost construct poetry in front of me there, how much of that is done verbally and how much of it is done on the paper?
It's happening simultaneously. It's writing and sort of thinking it and verbalizing it. It's all one. I don't necessarily separate it because I'm doing them all at the same time. The thinking, the speaking, and the writing. It's one connected thing.
Interesting.
Well.
So Charlie is a bit of a comics geek, a real fan. He's got a particular superhero, the Black Panther.
Yeah.
Comics part of your reading diet when you were growing up?
A little bit. Like I read the dictionary, and I read my father's books because those were the books I had to read. But I'd be at my cousin's house and I'd read a comic, or I'd be at my best friend's house and I'd read some comics. They weren't as big a part of my life as they are for Chuck.
What is it that they give Chuck in particular? Do you think the superhero is a good model of a hero for him?
I mean, for him it is. Yeah, I mean, I think it was definitely a way for him to A, get engaged with text. B, it was every kid wants to be bigger than life, They want to be a superstar or a superhero or just be cool. So you got that. And then you think about the metaphor of how do you deal with the woes of the world as a kid. And you can feel empowered sometimes by how the Black Panther faced his challenges and overcame them, And it's not necessarily literal, it's metaphorical.
I want to ask you about the moment in the novel where Charlie gets himself into, or almost gets himself into, some deep trouble. And it becomes really evident in your novel how thin that line is, how easy it is to be drawn into trouble, even when you're not looking to make that choice. And his granddad gives him some advice. Again, he's good, that granddad.
He's a good one.
Yeah. And he more or less says to him, you've got the choice of either rolling with the people who stick to the rules or those that break the rules. So it puts the responsibility back on him.
There's a big question in there.
Yeah.
And I think my father, he makes a statement to me. It's like a lesson he'll share with me. And I don't even know if I fully understand it. Maybe you understand it. He says, never surround yourself with people who have less to lose than you do.
Wow.
What does that mean?
I think it means it's the same thing. Like if there are people who their chance or their success in life is on a thinner line and they're making choices because they have less to lose than you do, and your choices are the one you're looking at their choices saying maybe I'll go with that choice. But if they have, maybe they have a couple less options than you do. You have the option of going to college. They have the option of going to prison or selling drugs.
Got it.
That's
So
my thought on it.
So that's Randy Preston, and again,
He's been playing guitar for us, by the way. We should mention that.
Yes, and so that just speaks to, again, who's in your circle, who's in your life, and Randy's been in my life for a while, and I think if you have people in your life who have similar ambition, or even more than you do, who have similar talents, or even more than you do, who have as much love and verve for embracing life as you do, if not more, you really can't help but trust that you are going to be okay around them. And in fact, you may be better, And that's what Granddad is trying to teach Chuck.
Yeah.
You got to look out for who's in your circle.
Yeah. I picked that up because I found that a really interesting point. It's a different point from just saying you have to make the right choices.
Right.
And most books, or most literature for children, says you've got to make the right choices.
Right.
But this is actually saying you've got to choose the right people.
Choose the right
and
people.
in a way that kind of pulls against this, you need to get on with everybody. You need to open up your life to experiencing many different people. But here we have a point which is be careful who you choose to surround yourself with.
And it's like not saying you can't be acquaintances or be cordial and nice, but who are the people that you want, who do you want to ride with? Who do you want to be in that car on the journey with you? And that's not everybody. If I'm driving 12 hours straight and you can't drive, I don't need to be in the car with you.
I think this book does a great job of highlighting that to the nth degree. I mean, with the whole ending of that, it's so evident that this is not something that he was like, let's go and dun-da-da.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, wow, I'm here? How did I get here?
How did I get here?
And I think that's the experience of a lot of kids. That's a real, like, I have friends who've said to me, I know how I got in this situation. I'm not even sure. They don't know. And I think what Granddad is saying is you got to be aware of where you are and who you're with, because you're going to find yourself in a situation like, it sucks to have to say, it wasn't my fault. I didn't know. I couldn't figure it out.
Now, contrarily, wouldn't it be great to find yourself as a musician playing on stage with Bruce Springsteen? Right? And wondering, how in the world did I get here?
Right.
So it can work both ways. The idea is to surround yourself with people who are going to uplift you and not bring you down.
Right.
Or shooting a few hoops with the Harlem Globetrotters, maybe.
Exactly. And having your cousin sit there fuming because she didn't get picked.
I know. I can't tell you, I was on her side.
Right. We all were.
Yeah, but it's right that's how it worked out. But just before we leave this, it seems that we've gone into the really deep areas of the book. But it's fun too, isn't it?
Right.
And there's a lot of basketball playing in there. How important is sport for young people, do you think?
I think it's a great metaphor for our lives. I think obviously there's physical and, sort of emotional advantages to being physically active and learning about competition. I have a 10-year-old daughter, and we play Monopoly at home. We play horse. We shoot baskets at home, and she's extremely competitive. And she does not know how to lose. She gets upset with me. And I went to her school for the awards ceremony. And at the awards ceremony, her gym teacher presented awards for the class. And she got the sportsmanship award. And I was like, how is this possible? Who is this kid?
I know my daughter.
That's not my kid. She got the sportsmanship award. So it let me know two things. One, that obviously some of the stuff we're trying to teach her at home, even though she may not exhibit it at home, she's learning it. And when she gets out into the world, out in the world, she knows how to act. And number two, that the sports that she's involved in, she's learning how to be that kind of person who's kind and competitive, who's giving and active, who knows how to have that balance. But I find that sports, in particular basketball, which I use in Rebound and Crossover, is a great way to frame the story, to get kids to want to pick up the book and to keep turning the page. But ultimately, Nikki, the books aren't about sports. They're about life. They're about friendship and family and crushes and how do I sort of make my way in this world. Yeah. Coming of age.
And that's why we probably left that question to the end, because the other things were much more significant in terms of what the story is about.
Right.
Kwame, thank you so much for talking to me this afternoon in the Reading Corner. Randy, thank you so much for the songs.
Thank you,
it's
Nikki.
been really nice to meet you.
Thanks for listening to In the Reading Corner with Just Imagine. If you've enjoyed this podcast, You can find many more on the podcast section of our website, justimagine.co.uk, plus via iTunes or your usual podcast provider. Don't forget to pass the pod and recommend this fantastic free resource to your friends and colleagues. Just Imagine also has a free fortnightly newsletter packed full of the latest news, CPD training, reviews and giveaways. To sign up, visit justimagine.co.uk/newsletter.